Good afternoon. Welcome to this one-of-a-kind masterclass where we will discuss experience state playbook and the changing landscape of consumer engagement. Today, we are joined by many leaders who occupy the diverse charters and are trying to build organizations that are solving big needs of the market. To make this relevant, we will discuss different topics. For example, when we are building organizations, do we really have operation charters and experience as a lever for growth? Every category has broadly 2-3 dominant players which capture the mind space and loyalty of the users. So what is the switch cost for these users? Let's discuss this and many other insightful topics. To discuss this today, we have Jairam Karthik. Hi Jai, and welcome to the session.
Thank you, Ankit.
Jay has spent 2 decades crafting differentiation and dominance by reinventing how customers feel when they interact with a brand. From brands like Amazon, American Express, Citibank, Tata Group, to the new age brands like Razorpay, Jay has amazing experience. With his insights, you are about to learn what organizations can do to create the never experienced moment for their customers. With Jay, I am Ankit Garg. I had experience for Razorpay at customer experience, and I have about 15 years of experience. Before Razorpay, I was with Tata's Growth. With that, let's kick it off. To set the stage, Jay, we generally start the conversation with what should new age startups or startups do to build experience. However, today I want to start with generational organizations, considering you have a lot of experience on both sides of organizations. What makes these generational organizations or institutions survive for such a long time? And what do you think new age startups can do as a shortcut or can take a short pill to build these experience in a very short time?
Interesting question, Ankit. So, are there answers to a shortcut? If that's the question, prescriptively the answer will be no. This is like saying, is there a way to fast forward it? I probably think yes. Courtesy technology, AI, multiple moving parts that are happening in the world of automation, highly possible that we expedite the pace. Having said that, is it easy to just cut short what companies have done in many 100 years? The answer is no. So let's first think about generational companies. For the folks who've joined on video, if you could use your chat option to be able to tell me the top 3 brands that are top of mind from a recall when it comes to generational companies. Which are those companies that you trust the most? I probably think 3-4 companies will stand out, but in India, and these are personal opinions that I'm going to share of how I feel, more than what I endorse here doing a role for a company, for Razorpay, is you would probably come across a company like Tata. If you ask this globally, you would probably come across organizations like probably an Apple of sorts, Toyota in some cases, and so on. The 3 or 4 things in generational companies or institutions that have survived over many 100 years are 3-4-fold. May sound cliche to a world today which may say that can I make it quick and fast, but these are not cliches for sure. So let me start with a very simple analogy. If you had several lakhs of money and you want to invest that money, who would you trust is the first question. Which is that company that you will blindly put your money on? Those are companies which have done 3 or 4 consistent things, and if you didn't bat an eyelid before doing that, they've done these 3-4 things as a principle. I'm not saying these are the only things, but they're principles, they are levers which have definitely got them to where they are. Right? Number 1 is definitely trust. And by trust, it's a very broad definition when it comes to trust. Trust done consistently is the only reason why they are where they are. And under trust, you could put everything. You can call the company very compliant. You can say, hey, they fulfilled everything that they said the exact way that they promised me. You can talk about customer first as an approach. You can talk about how their products have fulfilled what you need. It's a broad definition. The second clear part for me is personal relationships. how well have you personalized journeys for your customers when it comes to experience, not necessarily service? And we'll talk about that probably during the conversation on how I differentiate experience from service. Most of us on the, again, who've joined us here, if you would have an elderly parent, you would still see them walk up to an old branch, meet the branch manager, have a conversation about educational loans, about their personal lives, is because personal relationships have become so strong that you see the brand much beyond a transaction. So those are that's the second part. I mean, first one very clearly is trust, which is a very broad definition, which I just spoke about. The second piece very clearly is how well have you forged relationships which are very personal in nature, that you trust the company way more than a transaction. The third, and I think the most important part, which a lot of companies probably try but they do an okay job and not a very good job, is exception over rule. It's very easy to write a set of rules. How simple is it to write a rule? Let's take some of our real life examples. You can book a ticket but you can't cancel. If you cancel, you'll lose half the money. If you cancel within 24 hours, you will get this. If you cancel after 12 hours, you get that. Very easy rules which are written. What if a person genuinely is allowed trust to say, in a year, we will no questions asked, you can go ahead and cancel or make a change to a ticket that you've booked with an airline, for example. Why do you need so many levels of questions being asked is the problem. The contrary answer people will say is it's abuse. The person who's decided to abuse the system will anyway do that. For one individual or a set of individuals, we've actually said the remaining 99 will go through the same pain. Yeah. So comes the third part, which is how many companies are ready to exception things for you without you asking for it. Every time you ask for it, you're actually asking for something which is a request. Without the request, if you volunteer to be able to say that we're going to make it easy for you, it's a journey that was not anticipated, but it so happens that you need to make a change. So those are three parts I consistently think companies which are large, generational, companies which have lasted very long do pretty well.
Yeah. Oh, very interesting point, Jay, and I can see the passion of experience in you when you answer that. So this brings me to my next question, Jay. What do you think is the switch cost today? Do you really think there is a loyalty to a brand? And do you think people, do not really switch very easily from one brand to another?
Broad-based answer I'd give is yes, there is loyalty. But is there a very high switch cost from the past? I personally think it's becoming much less complex to switch today. Courtesy the world of binaries that we live. It's yes or a no. I don't like Uber, I'm going to probably do an Ola way. I don't like Zomato, I probably would do a Swiggy way personally. I don't like a pair of glasses that I'm wearing from some company, I'd probably change that. The switch cost is much simpler today. Having said that, I think there are 2-3 consistent pieces which keep you still very loyal to an organization. Right? Let's take an example of probably telcos or telecommunication companies. We are a very large player. I still have a number which I have not changed probably in 20 years or so. Despite that, you had an incumbent who came into the market, disrupted the market a couple of years back.
Yeah.
We all have a second phone, but it's not like you've completely shifted out of the first phone. There is number portability available, by the way. So the ones who argue saying, oh, my number is available everywhere, it's very, very tough for me to be able to shift the number is no longer a problem. You can port your number very easily. Having said that, there are fundamentals probably that brand A is doing very well than brand B, without quoting names, that continues to keep you as engaged with the first brand.
Or the relevance.
Or the relevance. But here is the issue, and I think the word experience becomes cliche when you use this formula only when things are going well. Loyalty shift can very easily happen when things are just normal. If every aircraft took off on time, landed on time, there was no year-end traffic or peak traffic or what we otherwise call blackout seasons in the year, and you had no problem at all, none of us would probably never have any kind of loyalty for anybody. Loyalty comes when you're in a difficult scenario or a difficult situation. Companies which go that extra mile to be able to solve that in a not so normal journey, not so obvious journey, are the ones who eventually have higher switch costs to another brand. And you know, for me, insurance is a product that's very close to my heart for two reasons. One, I get remembered only on the due date when I have to be renewing my car insurance or health. Otherwise, the remaining 364 and a half days, probably they don't remember where I exist. Actually, it's not true. They start about 350th day or so. You're like 2 weeks to it.
So we have a life of a week.
We have a life of a week, right? You will get barrage of calls saying, I'll get this waived for you, I'll get that waived for you. It's a beautiful spot for people to build organizations where this loyalty becomes very high. I would love to stick personally to a brand which recognizes me through the year. And when I say this, it's not about how many times you communicate with me. That's not what I meant. Walk up to a hospital today for a cashless admission of a parent or someone important in your family for a critical illness. You would exactly know the number of questions you get. Are you part of the network? It's not a network hospital. You don't have cashless. You have cashless. 50, 80 things which you never heard when you were paying the premium. Now here, if a company is able to solve this, is it easy to solve? No. But are we thinking experience to be able to solve? If you do, I probably think loyalty is going to be for a longer period than where we peg ourselves on this particular dimension. This is not a vector you can earn just by saying that I've called you one day before and said I'll waive it up for you. If price is the only constraint, if price is the only piece one is looking at, I would assume this is a good place to be. But there are much more bigger considerations, humane considerations that people have in mind when it comes to experience. So I think loyalty exists. Shift costs are easy because there are options available. No longer is the market monopolistic. Options make you think very easily. Last but not the least is there is a player who's always there to tell you that I can contest you and disrupt you. So it is a dilemma companies have to solve. But trust me, if there is a product here that needs to be built, the product is called loyalty. I think we take a long time to be able to build that. So yeah.
So true, and I can really relate to some of the examples you gave. Moving on, Jay, I don't think any masterclass today can be summed up without discussing AI or automation. The buzzword is AI.
Yep.
However, in my experience, and I may be wrong, but AI has really solved for only simple things and not really the complex problems. The most obvious problems are solved. So how far do you think we are, and do you really think AI can take over service completely?
I think the straightforward answer I'm going to give is I don't have answers. I like to be vulnerable when I say I don't know where AI is going to land. Having said that, I'm super committed to the fact that AI is the way to go when it comes to a lot of service use cases. Again, hopefully we'll touch upon service and experience a little more at depth. But I'm going to give again another analogy so that's easy. Super happy, easy day. It's a Sunday. I'm at home. I switch on Netflix. There are fantastic options that are customized for me. It's available right in front of me saying, okay, this is what the genres that you can watch and so on. The next day, probably you come back at work super frustrated and you want something which is very, very light. I don't like watching horror late in the night. You have a choice, of course. But if these options eventually can go on AI, maybe it will over a period of time. There is a way to pattern it. There is a way to see trends and so on. But I still think human intuition and intrinsically human judgment are not going to be replaced very easily. And for me, a human to human connection is extremely important, especially in a digital journey, because there was a time if your money is stuck somewhere, you could walk up or connect to a human and say, where is the money? Today you do that on a chatbot. You call them names which are very cool. They're usually acronymed for you to connect with them very easily. But the personalization element is just going down. So with AI, I feel there are 2-3 parts that will happen and it should happen. One, all your easy, lesser on condition, not too complex queries should go to AI. And even an element of second level complication should go to AI. But all your super condition driven, extremely judgment, well-reasoned arguments should still sit with humans. That's probably where I see this going, but I don't say this as someone who can see the future. I'm saying it as someone who's vulnerable when I say that I don't know where this is going to go and end. Right? The second part for me for AI, which is very important, is if you broadly had a model which is what percentage of your day-to-day need to interact be with human beings, I think it should be a very small percentage of high-order, complex queries that should be with human beings. The remaining 75-80% should go through AI, automation, chatbots, so on and so forth, right? RPA, so on and so forth. I mean, I'm using loose words here because I don't want to get into details when I speak about this. Have a superhuman who's paid much higher than having several thousand people doing it, a few hundred good people who can solve it, and the remaining should go to a machine, because service use cases are very easy to load on AI.
Yep.
Experience use cases will take much longer. That's very clearly where I see the trend going.
So, on a lighter note, I hear you say that we still have our job safe for next few years.
For the ones who can create experience, the answer is yes. So for the ones who just solve day to day, which is your usual turnaround times, call centers, BPOs, picking up calls, answering responses, I think most of that second part, if you're not able to upgrade, you probably have you have some bit of risk, is what I would suspect. Again, not speaking as an expert, I'm just thinking what is the obvious. So yeah.
Fantastic. Lovely, Jay. I think let's get into another very interesting track, and I think I talk about this passionately because I feel this every day. So as to how do we set a very fine balance between compliance and experience, and sometimes why does it feel that they are working against each other?
Do you really think it works against each other? I personally don't think so. This is a lens that needs to be relooked at. I have never seen, and I'm going to again use a very loose word called regulation, and from there comes compliance requirements, and from there comes a set of changes that you are expected to build. Most of them come with a very long runway. They give you a direction, they let you know that this direction is coming your way, they let you know that this is going to change by guideline. So there's a lot of time available. And I spoke about trust in the earlier question.
Yep.
For you to be trusted, you also need to be compliant at some point. A lot of times the grays become a yes, then grays becoming a no. That interpretation, I think, I think the world comes back to you, or the cycle comes back to you at some point. It comes back to catch you much faster than what it is. So I personally think they complement each other pretty well. I also think they supplement each other really well, especially when you're trying to solve things like, for example, KYC. I want to be sure that I'm transacting with a person who's, as a customer, who's someone who's absolutely, I've gone through the right compliance checks. I don't think there should be a shortcoming when it comes to that. KYC is just an example. Right?
Yeah.
There could be hundreds of such discussions we can have on compliance. The other piece on generational companies that you brought up some time back, Ankit, they are very high on this broadly. There's no shortcut which tells you that, okay, if I take this through the path of least resistance, I'll get through this. Yeah, you may get through it, but it catches you back at some point or the other. I personally think they are not two different things, they're pretty much the same.
Sure. Just a double click on this, Jay, and I am not saying, in the interest of a lot of leaders who have joined us today, businesses are not saying that, we don't want to be non-compliant, or they want to be compliant as soon as possible. But there is a way of working which is set between the consumer and the business. You're working in a certain way, the consumer is comfortable in that way, the business is comfortable in that way, and then suddenly a regulation comes which changes how you will operate from here on. I am talking about that discomfort, and I just want to know that how can the business make it very subtle, non-disruptive, and ensure that this is very smooth for both sides.
Very interesting question. So it's, the closest I could think of now is probably an example of FASTag. The change or the shift from paying long lines of tolls, taking back change, keeping change, carrying those thousands of slips that come your way, especially if you're doing a long journey, all of that has gone away. Now, you still have a person who gets into the wrong lane, disrupts you, and creates a huge delay. Now, can you bring this change which is very seamless? The answer is probably not without friction. So I think somewhere as business, everyone should recognize that every change comes with some level of friction. Is it because of change resistance? Is it because of the fact that you're not acclimatized to the new change very quickly? You're going to take your own time. All of this is true. All of this is true. Or it's like shifting from old world manual cars. I drove a manual car for years. Now I've shifted to a automatic car. It's extremely complicated for me to go back to the old car, old ways of driving today, probably in cities which are reasonably congested. So that's the same amount of energy, time, friction one has to be ready for. The second part I think is communication, and I'm going to over insist on communication, over pivot on communication. Because if you need to communicate to your customer what is coming, can you break it down? Can you break it down by what's going to create angst? Can you break it down that you anticipate that it's going to create a journey that's going to be longer than what it is? You're probably going to ask them more questions about multiple things. All of this can be very easily planned. So if we are easy on change resistance, if we are easy on friction-free journeys and we are able to map it, you can minimize. But your point, can it be so simple that you shifted overnight without anyone getting to know? I don't think so. It comes with a price.
Fair point, and I think this really makes sense because I think regulations or changes is the way of life, and businesses have to ensure it is done.
And Ankit, I'm going to interject. I think I have a lot of colleagues, friends in my past life, especially the organizations I've worked in. They live in different countries, and everywhere I go, there is this super pride that I carry about how advanced we are when it comes to money movement, payment acceptance, and payments as an industry. I mean, considering I sit in this chair, I think I can say this very confidently. The last time that I traveled in India with being very conscious about the fact that I need a credit card in my pocket, I need cash in my pocket, was months ago, years ago. I don't think I recall whether any of these instruments are today available because it is so powerful at a touch of a QR that you're able to move forward. I think the change that you're talking about has come with convenience too. The initial piece is probably difficult, and the beautiful part is the other countries are going to do a catch-up, and that catch-up is probably about 5-7 years behind where we are, 5 years at least to start with if they do it at great pace. And consider countries of our scale. I am not talking about smaller countries. It's much easier to adopt a change like that, and probably more disciplined to be able to adopt to that change. But for a diverse country of our size and scale and expanse, the next best probably I can assume is a country which is as large as China or probably US to do this catch-up game to get where we are. Right? For me, when you transact in India, that's another piece on compliance that I want to bring about. Dual factor authentication, when it came, I used to be working in a bank. It was an extremely complicated process. OTPs will not get delivered, SMS engines were not very pruned, a lot of people will not get SMSs, transactions get failed, success rates fail, so on and so forth. Look at it today.
Oh, it is flawless.
Yeah. So I think change comes with time. So we'll have to be patient. So,
Thank you for the insights, Jay, and I think I really enjoyed our conversation. I still have time for a couple of questions from our audience, and I think someone in the audience heard you. The question is, do companies interchangeably use service and experience, and are they really the same?
I think I touched this topic several times. So, closest analogy again, because conceptually it's very easy to give this in English. Experience, I would define it as every touch point in the journey. Everything that's possible, from product, fulfillment, onboarding, termination, online, offline, omni, and so on and so forth. And service, I would call it to be a subpart, a much smaller part, and usually, and I'm not again defining it very precisely with a very sharp definition, a small little part which you're talking about tactically or transactionally is what I would see as service. We are in a hotel today. I think the air conditioning, assume, is very, very cold here. I walk up to the front end office and I talk about fixing it. They fix it in 5 minutes. Well done is all I can say to the service. But the person here who should be doing my job is to figure out how well is the temperature controlled in the room. Right? Like airlines usually announce saying cabin pressure is at this height and it's kept to 24 degrees for your comfort. Right? And that's experienced very clearly. So it is interchangeable a lot of times. And a lot of times I think words like customer success being used with customer service.
Yep.
A lot of times BPO call centers being used with service as a holistic, vector. Those are things which keep happening all the time. But I think this is the way one should differentiate. Don't leave any journey. Don't wait for your customer to come and tell you that my brakes have failed. Or blame the service center to say how many cars came to you with a brake problem. Only then will I get to know that my product stopped working.
Yes.
It surprises me when a lot of companies say that show me volumes, show me escalations, show me reach outs, people who've come back and complained online for me to know there is a problem. It's almost like saying the pill didn't work. Any company which releases the pill should also know that you track for it without the customer having to complain. And voice of customer cannot be the way to learn from mistakes, for mistakes. There should be internal mechanisms to solve what is breaking, and that is holistic experience.
Fantastic. So what do you think, in your experience, should companies first focus on experience or should I focus on service?
Depends on where the company is. The short answer is if you are a 0 to 1 company, early stage startup, you're just trying to find ground. I would think have a minimum standard guarantee of service. Minimum. Right? It's not to say you'll have to do all of it, because your energy is actually to figure out whether your product has got a market fit, you can sell the product, scale it at your 1 to 10 journey and so on. But like saying getting into an aircraft 0 to 1, I don't have a seat belt or I don't have a seat available for you to sit. It doesn't work. You'll have to get the basics right. So 0 to 1 can afford to probably solve only service is my limited view, but with minimum standards for everything. 1 to 10 journeys, and I think every time you scale, your processes are slower than the growth. So you'll have to make good of how your processes catch up to the growth. You can't grow 50% with processes growing at 5%. That game's not going to work. So some bit of experience has to be thought through. And if you're especially in a omni world, which is a combination of online and offline as a company, and you love to expand more, and you want to disrupt, very clearly this is a huge vacuum that I see in the market very clearly, a very large gap. They think, let's solve everything. Your market fit is done, your PMF is done, we've scaled very well, we'll figure out at step 50. No, it doesn't work like that. Right? Companies which are mature, I think, is a non-negotiable. You'll have to solve experience holistically, not look at only service and say, oh, that particular issue got solved, but it'll recur again and let another customer suffer about it. That doesn't work. So yeah, it's a combination of those 3 journeys when it comes to where you are in your own growth path. One has to decide.
Fantastic, Jay. I think, like I said, I enjoyed the conversation, and I hope our audiences will build journeys on trust, processes, and follow the right path. With that, thank you so much. That's our time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate everyone who's taken time out.